Welcome to Emotional Resilience, Living with the Fruit of the Spirit. I'm your host and author, Ron Ovitt. Today we're looking at Lesson 23, Mind Skills, Part 2. We're going to talk about focus and attention exercises. You know, we're getting into the part now with mind skills where it's going to be really experiential knowledge. It's not just going to be head knowledge. You're going to get some knowledge today, and I'm excited to teach it. But we're also going to really lean on you to go ahead and practice these things. It's not going to do any good to talk about emotional regulation if we're not going to do the regulating, right? And so we need to practice that. We need to practice. And so we'll be doing different exercises each week, and I'll go over them lightly here on video, and then you can go ahead and practice on your own and then meet as a group. And I encourage you now, if you don't have the notes, today's going to be heavy on the notes. Get the notes, okay? If you're watching by yourself, email me at ron@empowerministry.org, ron@empowerministry.org. Mention Lesson 23, and I'll be happy to send them to you, okay? Well, last week we talked about being driven to distraction. And that was an introduction to the fact that we're going to do focused attention exercises. You know, I've been teaching this for 15 years, and I have to admit that at this point in time, perhaps one of the most important mind skills that we're doing is focused attention. You know, we're seeing a rising in addictions, in antisocial behavior, and ADHD type traits, in boredom and anxiety. Why? I think because of this fast-paced, distracted environment that we're living in. We're losing the art of focus. Look at that list that I have there that we talked about last week, the list that compares ADHD and what happens as a result of childhood trauma. I mean, we're looking at hyperactivity and impulse control, agitation, irritability, outbursts, disorganization, poor self-esteem, poor concentration, restlessness, inattention, high rate of self-medicating, easily distracted, difficulty with sleep, doesn't seem to listen, memory issues. You know, a lot of us have some of these symptoms, and we need to work on it. And the good news is focused attention and the other mind skills that we're going to go through are really the answer for this. There's hope today, and I hope you know that, okay? Now, there's another grouping that we could fall into, and it's one that's come out recently. And it's for those that act as if we do have ADHD. I told you last week that I've had a lot of the symptoms throughout my life, but we really don't qualify for a diagnosis. Rather, these symptoms are caused by the radical changes in our modern life. It's a response to the increased stimuli that bombard us constantly from all the media and social networks. It's trained our brains to move faster and faster, constantly looking at screens, right? We talked about that last week. The average person in America is about 7 hours a day looking at screens. And so how do we keep up with all that? Well, it creates our brain to react to that. And what they call it now is, if you don't have the diagnosis, but you have a lot of the symptoms, they call it VAST. That's V-A-S-T, that's variable attention stimulus traits. Well, what are some of the characteristics of it? I have a whole chart of a page and a half of chart of looking at the characteristics. It's not a diagnostic tool, but you can rather look at it's a pairing, if you will. It's a pairing of paradoxical pairs, right? Ups and downs, left and rights, useful and problematic. We've divided it into useful and problematic. And as you look at that, you'll see that some of these traits fit. And they're good. You know, you're looking at the useful column and you say, boy, I have some of that. Well, then go with your strengths. one of the greatest things, instead of thinking, gee, I'm distracted or I have ADHD, go with your strengths. They're gifts. When I looked at this list for myself, a lot of these things pertain to me, and I've turned them into strengths. In a lot of my videos out there, I have a whole thing called Mr. Change Agent. Why? Because I'm a change agent. And I'll never forget when I first heard of that term, it was years ago in Fast Company magazine. They talked about a guy that came into an organization and he was changing things around and moving things, and people were getting upset, but it was so good, the changes he was making. And somewhere in there they said that he was a change agent. And I remember having this epiphany. No wonder I get in trouble, I think. I'm a change agent. It's that intuitive part of me, that creative part of me that sees things that can be changed for the better. And that's why I teach this stuff, because I want us to be able to work with the issues that we have, where we can change and we can move ahead. And so I've been able to turn a lot of these useful things, not just to be useful, but turn them into strengths and work with them. And I encourage you to think that way for yourself. The problem is it gets into problematic because we can slip into it. With ADHD and with some of the vast characteristics, we can then overwhelm. Time gets, we're only thinking of now. We get we go overboard. A person that plays video games till 2 or 3 in the morning, right? You get hooked on something. For example, let's look at this one. Naturally curious, always wanting to know who, what, where, why, and how, never satisfied until they get the answer. Well, that can be a strength. That can be a real strength, but what's the problematic? Well, you can be easily distracted then by novelty or any puzzle, conundrum, unsolved problem, or beguiling opportunity, however irrelevant it may be. And so you can become almost eccentric, right? And you're working and you're not maybe doing what's best, right? And so every one of them can have a problematic side. But the good news is if we can become aware of that, we can go with our strength, we can set up all kinds of guidelines to help us from going into that. A lot of the issues that I had as a child, we didn't have definitions for them back then. And I realized when I was studying this years ago that the way I went through graduate school and studied, and that is I would have to have 2 or 3 or 4 books out because I could only read 4 or 5 pages at a time without me staying on the same paragraph for about a half an hour, And so what I realized is that if I could keep my attention, read this book, then turn the corner, get into this book, write notes on that, then get on this book, or take a break for a few minutes, then come back, I learned to adapt. And a lot of this is up to us to say, okay, I have this, but now I can adapt, okay? There's another issue that's going on too that I talk about in here, and that's when we lose our focus and we get off into dark thinking, right? We get off task into dark thinking, and that can happen. That happens to a lot of us. We have learned a lot about the brain, right, in the last years, and with all the scanning ability, and now we have the fMRIs, it's functional magnetic imaging. It's like a moving X-ray, and it has increased our ability to see areas in the brain that are active, and even when we're just thinking. And they've done all kinds of brain scans, and so we're able to see things. And what happens is that when we're engaged in any task, when we're engaged in various types of thinking, or that an area of neurons light up, and that grouping of neurons is called a connectome. That's a connectome. So you have these groupings, and they've went through the Connectome Project, and they've done with thousands of people, all kinds, and they've found all kinds of networks. Doesn't mean we know a lot about them, because you're talking about billions of connections here, but they do know that the different networks light up. These are connectomes. When you're engaged in a task, the connectome that lights up is a task positive network, TPM. Dr. Hollowell and Dr. Rady, in their book, ADHD 2.0, and I recommend that book highly. writes about this phenomena. They say a task-positive network, TPM, gets you down to work. You're deliberately doing something and you are intent on it, unaware of much beyond the bounds of what you're doing. In this state, you don't consciously know whether you're happy or not, which is just as good as being happy. You know, it sounds a lot like what's been called before being in flow, right? If not better, he says, because you're not wasting any energy on self-assessment. You may become frustrated with what you're doing and have moments of anger or dismay, but if you stay in the task, in the TPM, those moments will pass, and the task-positive network, buoyant connectome that it is, will carry you along. But you can also, now listen, you can also get trapped in the task-positive network doing a task from which you cannot disengage. That's what we were talking about before, being problematic, right? This is hyper-focused state that people with ADHD can fall into. Far from being helpful, it can keep you stuck in one task, unable to shut down the screen, turn off the TV, or move from one paragraph to the next. That's what I was explaining in my reading. This is often unrecognized downside of focus. Now, it may sound like someone else's problem, but the truth is many of us are affected by today's environment, right? Take a closer look at that list that we talked about in the beginning of this lesson, right? And you'll see that many of us struggle with this. We're more distracted than ever. And that's what Hollowell and Rady write. They say this, incidentally, the reason that so many people are starting to look and act distracted as if they all have ADHD or VAST is that fewer and fewer people are spending time in the task-positive network. They are not spending enough time focusing on a single task. You know, we multitask all the time, don't we? Unfortunately, they say, task-positive network is akin to a muscle that, falls apart when it's not being used. So as we mentally flit around, the TPM weakens and our attention span shortens. When you allow your mind to wander from a task, or when you finish the task, or if you pause too long in anger or dismay while doing the task-positive network in your brain defaults to a different connectome. Let me repeat that, okay? When you allow your mind to wander from a task, or when you finish the task, or if you pause too long in anger or dismay while doing the task-positive network in your brain switches to a different connectome. And that's what they call the default mode network. Now this is important and it's exciting. This is newer technology and I'm excited to bring it to you. The connectome is called the default mode network. This is where we can use our brain for imaginative and creative thinking. So it's a nice thing to have, right? We're resting, we can daydream, we can do that. We can use this network to access our past or think about or plan for the future. In this mode in which we can daydream or make interesting connections between concepts. You're reflecting, right? It can be a positive thing. We're sitting there and all of a sudden we want to go into that for a good, positive reason. This is helpful, they say. However, we can get caught in a hard control rumination. And they say this, for neurotypical types, now let me go over that real quick. You're going to hear that phrase a lot more and more, neurotypical. When you're talking about ADHD or task and that, they're saying that they're not typical. Their neurons fire differently. There's a little bit different there. So they're calling the rest of us neurotypical. We're the typical people neurologically, okay? For neurotypical people, toggling over to the default network periodically allows to get some intellectual rest and relaxation. And you can probably identify with that, right? Daydreaming time, for instance, which isn't necessarily bad. But listen, but highly imaginative, and that's many of us, and creative people, again, that's many of us, like those who have ADHD or VAST, often get stuck in the default mode network, leading to horribly negative, gloomy, and self-critical thoughts. And that's where some of us end. That's where some of us go. All of a sudden, we're there. We're in this negative thinking. We're gloomy. We're self-critical. And you know, the good news is focused attention, by knowing that's happening, can come to the rescue. You know, it's easy to see some of these things and think, what's the use? What's the use? I am what I am. But you know what? There's hope today. There's tricks. There's things we can do. Focused attention helps us being aware of this, right? That's why we talk about emotional recognition. We would give up on anxiety and depression a long time ago if we didn't insist that, hey, listen, we can become aware. We can focus on our body. We can focus. We can become aware all of a sudden. We can stop and go, gee, I'm feeling kind of down or feeling anxious. And then what? We can start to regulate it. We can regulate it. And so it's not, you know, gloom and doom and everything's bad because we have anxiety. We can recognize. Then we can regulate. And the good news is later we can emotionally relearn. And we can work some of these things, and that works for this as well. Dr. Holloway and that say this, and they say there's a famous saying among neuroscientists: neurons that fire together, wire together. To be sure, when you're ruminating, you're repeatedly doing something that fosters a negative connection over time. But this neurological understanding shines a light on the solution as well. If neurons that fire together, wire together, making increasingly permanent connections, you need to fire them in another direction. Now I'm quoting these guys because I want you to know that this isn't just me speaking. These are world-renowned scientists that are saying some of these things, and I want you to really understand that it's true, okay? Listen to what they say, and this is kind of fun here. The minute you start to ruminate and slip into brooding negativity, look elsewhere. Do anything. Walk around, yell, dance a jig, dice celery, play the piano, feed your dog, sing row, row, row your boat while standing on one leg. Tie your shoes, whistle Dixie, blow your nose, jump rope, bark like a dog, howl like a wolf, call radio show and vent like a maniac, do a crossword puzzle, you know, work your brain, read a book, or try an exercise that zeroes in on your breathing, you know, exhale, inhale, hold for 3, repeat, right? After a few cycles, you will move out of the rumination caused by being stuck in the default mode network. The point is this, they say, focus on anything external to yourself, activating what? The task positive network, and it will shut down the default mode network. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that fun? But their point is this, you want to recognize when you're doing it, you're in the default mode, boom, do anything, get out of it, go into, that's sort of like what we talked about, grounding yourself, right? We'll talk about that when we get into some of the other things on relaxation. There's things you can do. Become aware, do something different, it snaps you out of it, right? And so we want to talk now about some of the exercises, and I'm going to go through this quickly, okay? Because I'm going to explain it, maybe illustrate it, but then you have to practice it. It's doing no good, you know, just by reading it, okay? Reading it won't give you the skill. This is skillage, not knowledge, okay? It's partly knowledge, but it's skillage, and that is you have to learn it, okay? So the first one's focused breathing. Now we're going to spend a whole lesson on breathing, but obviously focused breathing is important, and so I just wanted to talk about it. And I wanted to show you the typical way that we talk about when we're talking about breathing. I'll give you many more in lessons to come. What we want to do is find something we want to be able to relax, okay? And so, you can sit, and usually with your good posture, your back up, right? Maybe hands on your legs, and then you want to breathe. And typically people will talk about breathing in maybe a count to 3 or 5. And then some people say hold it for 1 and then exhale. So you want to inhale and exhale. But the way that we want to do it now, because this is focused breathing, is that we want you to focus on something. And so what we want you to focus on is the air going in when you inhale through your nostrils. You want to be able to feel the air going in. And then when you breathe out, you want to feel it just crossing your lips, okay? So let's try it once, okay? And so we want to breathe in slowly through your nostrils. Ready? Breathe in. Then you want to breathe out through your lips. Then breathe in. Breathe out. Now, there's another part I want you to focus on, and that's your belly. We don't want to breathe in the chest. This isn't like that. That's really, to be honest with you, that alerts your sympathetic nervous system. That's a panic reaction. We want to relax. This is a parasympathetic reaction, right? And so we want to breathe down in the belly. And so one way you can do that is put your fingers like this on your belly, and when you breathe in, right, you inhale, you expand your belly, and when you exhale, your fingers should come back. And so that gives you 3 things you can focus on. Your fingers, put your fingers on your belly, you breathe in, you feel it going into your nostrils. When you exhale, you feel it coming through your lips, and your fingers are moving down. Now, why are we doing that? Because we want to be able to focus. And you're going to realize, that you're going to become distracted. You're going to become distracted. And so that's the second exercise. How do we manage distractions? Now, if you were just breathing once or twice, like I'm having you do here, well, you probably won't be distracted. But what happens when you're going to do this for 15 minutes? That's what you want to eventually get to, right? You want to be able to relax, and we'll talk more about that in breathing. Well, part of what we want to learn is how do we go ahead and not be distracted? Well, we come back to the breathing. And so how do we do that? We inhale. We're focusing on the breath going in, and we exhale. And all of a sudden we're thinking, gee, I wonder, we're into it about 2 minutes, and we're thinking, what am I going to have for lunch? Well, we've just been distracted. And what we want to do, and this is important, we want to notice, gee, I'm distracted. But we want to do it without judgment. Because without judgment, then, we're going to be able to just notice it and return to the breathing. So we sit there and we go, oh, you know what? I've been distracted. And we come back to it. Now, all of a sudden, I'm back. I'm focusing on it in the nostrils and focusing back, and I'm back to focusing. I get distracted again. I'm being distracted. And we practice again. Now, the good news about that is not being negative about the fact that I'm being distracted. It's going to happen. The fact is we're rehearsing how to come back from distraction. That's an invaluable exercise. What's part of the problem, right, with the default network is that we're getting in too deep, right? Well, we can come back. So that first and second exercise are important. They're important to know that your mind will wander. Catch it. Don't be judgmental on yourself. Don't say, what's wrong with you? Come back to the breath, and it's an incredible, great exercise. Now, another way to embellish on that is being here now. And so, when you're distracted, you can say, gee, I'm distracted. But you know what? Here I am now, right? So you go, be here now. Or another one is, here am I, God, I'm here, Lord. I'm here, God. As a religious practice, you're just sitting there and you're in the presence of God. You're aware of that. And maybe you're doing it as a meditation and you're just breathing and here am I, God. Or here am I, Lord, right? Or you can even turn it around. You are here, Lord. And so, you're bringing your attention back to God, if that's what you're focusing on, or back to your breathing, okay? Now, there's other things. I talk about eating, right, in the fourth exercise. You can practice when you're eating. Pay attention when you're eating. It's so often we're so hungry and man, we're looking for that pizza and oh man, it smells good. And all of a sudden we take that first bite and you know what? We don't even see a bite after that. Maybe we just kind of tasted that sauce and after that it's just inhaling, right? The fact is a good exercise is what's the texture? What's the flavor? What temperature is it? Is it hot, cold, medium? Really get into it. Even looking at it, what are the different colors? But pay attention. That's a good time to really learn some exercises on focus. We all eat, right? So what is it we're eating? What's it feel like? What's it smell like? What's it taste like? Embellish, on that, and you'll find that you're going to be able to do focus. Now, another one that's interesting is open focus, okay? And this is a little different, but the thing is, when we're doing tasks, when we're focusing on things, we're in that task positive network, we're in a beta wavelength, they call in neurofeedback, right? To relax and be more relaxed, we want to go into an alpha state. And one way that Dr. Femi found out how to do this was open focus. He tried all kinds of things to get people to focus on. And nothing seemed to get them into an alpha space. And then one day he talked about space. And all of a sudden, boom, the needle started moving and they fell into an alpha state. And it happened over and over and over. And so a lot of times what happens is that we're constantly in a narrow focus. We're in a narrow focus. We're in that beta zone. And the thing is, if we get into an open focus, we can kind of relax. And so it's a really interesting way to be able to change our focus a little bit. And so one way we talk about is find something on a wall. It can be a picture. It can be whatever. If you have flowers hanging on a wall or something, picture something on a wall, look at it, then see another object on a wall and focus on it. And then focus on the space between. The space between. And you'll find yourself as you focus on that space, this isn't focusing on nothing, this is focusing on space, that you'll be able to relax. And so you can do that. Now, if you're comfortable, I'll give you an exercise. You can go ahead and close your eyes. And so one of the things they do is focus on the space around your thumb. And so you're focusing, on your hands, then you focus around the space around your thumb. Now, when you look at it, you can open your eyes and look, there's space around your thumb, right? And so it's down here and you're thinking about the space. Then you can go focus on the space between the thumb and the index finger. Focus around the space around it, and you'll be amazed as you're just think about if your hands are like this, think about the space between your hands. But you'll find if you just, and you usually wait 15 seconds, and they're not forcing you to. In fact, the words are really technically this, and I have them in the lesson. Can you imagine the space between your hands? And you wait 15 seconds, and you will be amazed at how that will help you relax. And I can get into an alpha state of relaxation like that just by doing a few seconds of focusing on space. And then I come back to here, right? Well, another one is shift to your heart. And this is an exciting one. And this is where you think of someone, a time when you felt real love or connection to someone. And so that's what happens here. And I remember I had a hard time doing this. I had a hard time thinking of this with people. And it may be, that you have a spouse or someone, but it also, you can do it with a pet. And then all of a sudden I thought of my son's dog, Rocco. Rocco reminds me of a dog I had when I was little, and Rocco's kind of a big dog, and I'll never forget when Rocco was excited to see me. He came and he put his paws right here, and I go, "Oh, Rocco, how you doing, Rocco?" And when I envision that, boom, all of a sudden I'm out of my head and I feel it in my heart. I feel this connection. And this warmth kind of comes around your heart. Well, it may be a grandma hugging you. It may be your spouse. But when you think of that, all of a sudden you're shifting from your head to your heart. And then you can hold on to that. And when I'm thinking of Rocco, I shift to my heart. And then what? I can shift to my wife. I can shift to my grandchild. And so you're shifting from your head to your heart, and you can hold on to that. And it's a really interesting way to focus. It gets you in connection with that real empathy and that real love. And you can think about God, right? And then, you can do different kinds of observing. Throughout the day, you're at your desk. Pick something out of your desk and observe it. What shape is it? How's it feel? What temperature is it? Is it sharp or dull? And you can do all kinds of things that will help you learn to focus. Another one is focused listening, right? How many things can you hear? Go outside and try to find, 5 things that you can listen to. I used to practice this all the time. You'll be amazed at how many things you can hear. Just by doing that, you can start to listen to that. And you can also, when you're listening to someone else, really listen. Look at their face. See how they're expressing. Look at their body language as you're listening to the tone of their voice. You'll be amazed at how you can increase your ability to focus. And you can also do that with emotional. You can refocus. Dr. Dan Siegel talks about looking at trauma, looking at things that agitate us or cause anxiety. And there are a lot of times we look at things, with too much concentration, and we can reverse that. He says there's a difference when you take salt and you put it in a spoonful of salt into a glass, stir it, well, now you're drinking salt water. But if you had 100-gallon big barrel of 100 gallons and you put a tablespoon of salt in there, it's not going to change it at all. And we need to look at that sometimes, at the things that are going on in our life. Is it in a glass or is it in 100-gallon barrel? Well, a lot of times it's in the 100-gallon barrel, and we're looking at it as if it's in a glass. Same thing, he uses a telescope. We're looking at something and we're looking like we're looking through a telescope and it's right there. But if we reverse the telescope, it puts it back there. And a lot of times we need to do that. A panic attack, right? We're all focused, everything's up here, and we say, hold it, stop. Reverse that telescope, right? Make it smaller. Hey, this is just faulty wiring. I'm not going to die. And we breathe and we relax, right? And we can do that with cravings. We can do that with a lot of our emotions. And then finally, focus on the presence of God. Find a place where you can be quiet. And one of the things, like even an open focus that I've done before, is focus on the space between you and God. And when I did that, boom, it was right here. God's presence is everywhere. And all of a sudden, when I'm focusing on, can I imagine the space between me and God? Well, it's right here, and I'm in His presence. Well, we can focus being in the presence of God and just basking in His presence, enjoying His presence. And then finally, exercise 11, we can go ahead and focus on changing our thinking. And the questions are, what am I feeling? Focus on that. What am I believing? See if we get in touch with that. Then ask ourselves, what's the truth? Ask God, Lord, what's the truth? And now we're in more of a meditative state, right? And we can focus on the truth. And so there's 11 different exercises here that you can do. And I implore you, please, if you don't have the lesson, contact me, Ron at empowerministry.org. That's Ron at empowerministry.org. Lesson 23, I'll be happy to send it to you. So practice, practice, practice. Next week we'll continue with some more mind skills. Thanks for joining us today on this Emotional Resilience Living with the Fruit of the Spirit class. Please share this video with others. Like, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you won't miss any of the other exciting classes. You can also, for books and videos and podcasts, you can go to our website, ronovitt.com, and find out more information.